In part 22, you'll find that thoughts are spiritual seeds, which, when placed in the subconscious mind, have a tendency to sprout and grow. But, unfortunately, the fruit is frequently not to our liking. The various forms of inflammation, paralysis, nervousness, and disease conditions generally are the manifestations of fear, worry, care, anxiety, jealousy, hatred, and similar thought. The problem then before us in the healing of disease is to increase the inflow and distribution of vital energy throughout the system. And this can only be done by eliminating thoughts of fear, worry, care, anxiety, jealousy, hatred, and every other destructive thought, which tend to tear down and destroy the nerves and glands, which control the exertion and the elimination of poisonous and waste matter. Welcome, guys, to Charles Honnell, the Master Key System, and we are in part 22, chapter 22. And as you can see by the intro here, we're going to be talking today about the effects of non-productive thought on your physical being, on your body, and no other time probably is there more apropos to talk about this as we are in the midst of a pandemic of disease, but also a pandemic of fear, which of course will bring on, as Honnell has said here, disease. So today, the value for you here obviously is going to be, let us discuss how we avoid bringing these conditions on ourselves. Obviously, we're aware of what's going on in the world, but as scripture says, there's a number of ways to be in the world and not be of the world, to still have that peace that can surpass all understanding. So if you listen to the lectures 1 through 21, we have focused intently on positive and habitual thought patterns from the basis of power, the consciousness of power, your knowing and understanding who you are. So let's get into part 22. Knowledge is of priceless value because by applying knowledge, we can make our future what we wish it to be. If the state of our health is not all that could be desired, let us examine our method of thinking. Let us remember that every thought produces an impression on the mind. Every impression is a seed, which will sink into the subconscious and form a tendency. The tendency will be to attract other similar thoughts, and before we know it, we'll have a crop which must be harvested. So I've referenced before Esther Hicks Abraham on this particular podcast. As you'll probably know, I follow a number of gurus and spiritual leaders and sages and different things like that, because no one person, I believe, has the answer. I think there's a conglomerate or a puzzle, if you will, of many different views and different understandings. And once we, can kind of bring all that stuff together, we begin to build our own level of knowledge and understanding. Now, having said that, Abraham, one of the things that is taught through Abraham is understanding momentum, something that she calls momentum. And momentum is simply this, the idea that you have a thought. You wake up in the morning and then you have a thought. And that thought is going to build, depending upon its nature and quality, it's going to be pull other thoughts similar to it. And so she normally says that, within 16, 17 seconds, another thought will come similar to that thought. And then you'll have a third and a fourth, and then off we go into momentum. It's up to us, the conscious being, to witness that, to understand what is taking place. So many years of my life was spent just reacting. So that is to say, I would get up in the morning and I would go about my day in exactly the same way. I would get out of bed and I would react to whatever happened. Instead of me instructing the day of how we were going to go, the day would instruct me. So if I was to get up and I immediately started thinking about whatever was troubling me yesterday, so I pretty much brought yesterday into today. And then I would go from there. So the perpetual stubbing your toe on the bedpost or getting the negative phone call or whatever the case may be, so many folks live their lives that way. Unfortunately for me, I got to the point where it was just too much. And of course, you look for different arenas to better your understanding and increase your consciousness. And so today, one of the things that I understand that I want to share with you that will give you power in your day-to-day life is just simply this. Eckhart Tolle says, in terms of consciousness, there's a thin line between those who are and those who are not. And the thin line is this. It's simply people who are conscious or on the path, they think about their thoughts. They think about their thoughts. They witness their thoughts. So, person A could just react, respond, move forward. I am my mind. I am my body. I am subject to whatever happens in the world, whatever my wife says, a husband says, children do, boss, etc. All of these are things I have to deal with. Life is happening to me. Life is happening to me. That's the small me. That's the ego-based me. That's the mom, that's Sally, that's the sales director. People who are within their five sensory data only. Now, the other way, a more productive way to think about this is from the larger I. The larger I. So the observer. I am not my body. I have this body, but I am not the body. I have access to mind, but I am not the mind. And so you can witness thoughts. You don't have to attach yourself to them, be they fearful or otherwise. And it's important that you know that I'm not suggesting that you ignore what is taking place in your five sensory area, in your reality. Do not ignore it. Give it its proper recognition and its ability to exist. Because guess what? It does. The difference is you do not have to engage in it. You do not have to engage in the pandemic. You do not have to sit and watch CNN all day. You can go inward. You can begin to see a much better day for you, for your family, and others. Now listen, I'm speaking from experience. I think I mentioned to you a little earlier in lecture 20 or 19 that I do have a family member that had the virus. Unfortunately, he is recovered. So I know what it feels like to get news of that magnitude. There's someone close to you who is sick. Well, one of the first things I did was witness how I felt. And it was unsettling. The second thing I did was witness how I want to feel. I don't want to feel fearful. So I must go back to my foundation. And Sanel said here, foundation of power is being conscious of who you are, being conscious of your own power. If there is any physical condition which it is necessary to change, the law of governing visualization will be found effective. In other words, if you find yourself in a condition, and we're talking about health here, if you find yourself in a condition, then now is the opportunity for you to focus on health. To focus on health. This is your time to speak those things that are not as though they were. This is the time, as Neville Goddard says, to live from the end and go into your imagination and see yourself healthy. Don't deny that there's something going on in your body. You can see it. It's there. Okay, fine. What are we going to do? Well, I'm going to pronounce myself healthy. Power of life and death is in the tongue. The tongue, of course, gives us our speech, our words, and as we discussed in earlier lectures, words are simply vessels for our thoughts. So what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? And I know it's difficult when you get difficult news and so many around you are responding in a way that makes you feel like, well, shouldn't I be as upset as they are? Shouldn't I be as fearful as they are? You have the choice to do that. However, you're going to meet the similar results as they are. More unsettlement, more nervousness, more fear, more anxiety. If that's the direction you want to go in, then yeah, continue watching the news and continue sharing negative information. Or you can go inward. You can be conscious of your power. You can see yourself full of health and living, and your loved ones on vacation, whatever it is that gets you into that higher vibration. Try that. Try that. It is through the law of vibration that the mind exercises control over the body. We know that every mental action is a vibration, and we know that all form is simply a mode of motion, a rate of vibration. In other words, you are not your body, your energy, you vibrate. Therefore, any given vibration immediately modifies every atom in the body. Every life cell is affected, and an entire chemical change is made in every group of life cells. Everything in the universe is what it is by virtue of its rate of vibration. Many people don't understand that. A lot of folks are not scientists, but here's the deal. Even light, the reason we have color is because we have different rates of vibrating light. There's really no red, there's really no blue, there's only light. But because we have prisms and rates of vibration, that it appears to our eyes, which of course are sensing the light based on its rate of vibration. No different than sound. The reason why we hear certain sounds and can't hear others is because of the rate of the vibration. Our ears are not as sensitive as animal ears, for example, who can hear higher rates of vibration. So Hanel is saying here, everything in the universe is what it is by the virtue of its rate of vibration. That includes you. Change the rate of vibration, and you change the nature, the quality, and the form. We can change the vibration and thus produce any condition which we desire to manifest in our bodies. We are all using this power every minute. The trouble is, most of us are using it unconsciously, and thus we are producing undesirable results. Here's what I'll tell you. This is a personal example of this level of consciousness versus a person who is unconscious, and also attempting to share information for folks who may or may not, well, more than likely, or may not be in a place to hear it yet. So I was excited, of course, years ago when I began to switch, but not so much switch, but my paradigm began to shift, and I was, seeing certain manifestations, and I was feeling really good about this new methodology and the way I was thinking. It was really, really awesome. Up until, you start sharing it with folks, and then you realize that, number one, people don't really care. Number two, even if they do care, they don't really understand, and it doesn't quite have the same, same value as it does to you. So one of the things that happened to me initially, I have a friend, and he's not ill, but he was going through a health crisis at the time. And I wanted to share this information because I thought it would be impactful. But what I found is it was somewhat rebutted. It was not well received. And I had to come to the understanding that a lot of people, number one, are unconscious. And number two, are very comfortable in their lack of knowing, lack of knowledge, their ignorance. And to the point where they would defend it. They would defend it. My suggestion to you is to be able to identify and discern those who are asking for your input and looking and seeking information, as opposed to those who are not. Because ultimately, you may as well be talking to a tree if a person is not willing to receive the information. It's going to hold no value to them. Now, they may come back days later, weeks later, years later, and you tell them the same thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, the invention of the wheel. But at that point in their lives, it's just not, they're just not there. And I think of myself the same way. There were points in my life where certain things that I hold very dear now, they didn't hold dear to me then. I didn't have the level of understanding that I have now. And I think a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'll have even higher levels of consciousness, because that's what happens. You increase your power, you increase your consciousness. So one of the things I want to say before we move on is this. A lot of time, people who are ill in their bodies, I'll just put it like this. I grew up where there were no real dietary constraints. There were no real dietary constraints. That means we ate pretty much anything. And it's a wonder that I didn't really have any health issues, up into my 30s. I ate meat, I ate fast food, I ate potato chips and soda and sugar and you name it. That's how I grew up, and I never challenged it, and that's what I ate. Well, I never had any health issues. I never was overweight. I always maintained a decent, weight. I was always for a man 6 foot tall, under 200 pounds. That's actually pretty good. I was athletic. I played, ball most of my life. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But unfortunately, there's so many people, even kids, who are beset by these types of behaviors, and their bodies begin to show signs of it early on. Obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure. So many people at young ages are on high blood pressure medication. So much so, I didn't even realize how many. I'd never been on medication my entire life. Still, I'm not on medication. But my point in telling you that is, I never saw a problem with going to McDonald's until I saw a problem with going to McDonald's. It's kind of one of those things. The light switch is on the inside. Eating processed food, I never saw a problem with that. Eating pork, I never saw a problem with that. I was raised that way until I did. And the way that I did was through enlightenment, through self-realization, through understanding the importance of keeping your temple clean. If you think of your temple as a receptor, which it is, and you are not the body, but it is a receptor here while you're on this plane. And, I'll tell you what, let me give you a better example. Imagine if you had a really expensive, I give you examples all the time about German sports cars. So you have a very expensive German sports car. I mean, it's awesome. It's your BMW, it's your Mercedes, it's whatever German car you like. So it's just, off the showroom floor, and you're ready to take it out onto the highway. And the guy gives you instructions on how to, do what you need to do to make sure it is performing at its highest. And one of the things he tells you is, listen, you have to put premium gas in this car. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. Now, because you know that premium gas is the highest and the most expensive, you say to yourself, it's probably not that big a deal. As long as I keep the tires rotated and the oil changed, the gas is not that big a deal. I'll save some money, cut some corners. Well, you do that. And the first time you do it, the car performs fine. It's not going to stop running because you put in unleaded regular one time. Your body, you're not going to become obese today because you ate, after 9 o'clock, a full meal and went to sleep on it, processed foods and meats and these sorts of things. You're not going to develop diabetes overnight or obesity overnight, but you develop a habit and a pattern. And what happens is, after a while, it's not a matter of if the car is going to not perform, it's when. Because unbeknownst to you, the carbon deposits that are building up within the fuel injectors and other areas of the engine, you can't see that. You can't see it. Every now and then you can feel it. It feels like the car is not moving as fast as it used to, or it feels like the car is not necessarily accelerating the way it used to. It feels like your body is getting more and more tired, as opposed to the way you used to be able to, maintain yourself. So it's a delay for most of us. And so the sense of urgency in terms of changing your habits are not there. So my point in telling you that exacerbated story is this, that there are so many people nowadays who don't really have a sense of urgency around this particular understanding as it relates to their health. And unfortunately, and I say this with a great deal of respect for folks who came into this world with some sort of illness, because that was out of your control, in terms of your parents being sick or passed something along. I say it with a great deal of respect for folks who have struggled with their weight and who have struggled with their physicality and health. And And I say it very respectfully, but I still say it. And the truth of the matter is that it has to do with what's taking place inside of you. It has to do with what's taking place inside of you. And so many folks develop diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is completely avoidable. You develop it, meaning it is established within your life cycle by what you eat. Well, it's hard to convince people of that. Why? Because they don't want to stop eating what they're eating. Ultimately, I'm going to get off my soapbox. Ultimately, here's what helped me to get away from processed foods, meats, and things like that, and to become plant-based. It was a spiritual motivation, and that was to move higher in levels of consciousness. And I believe that the cleaner and the more efficient this vessel operates, the more of a conductor it becomes for the oneness with my source. That's it. That's it. Yeah, bacon tastes great. Really does. Whatever your thing was. But for me, what superseded my desire for substance to put in my body was the connectivity with my source. So your why has got to be there. In order for you to make these types of lifestyle changes, you've got to have those strong whys. Why am I doing this? And I can imagine if you're listening to a lecture like this, that you are looking for these types of methods and ideology. And for me personally, I wanted to have a stronger and deeper connectivity with my source. And I felt like the cleaner my vessel was, no chemicals, no processed meats and foods and things like that. And also, I don't ingest fluoride. So I have fluoride-free toothpaste and water, things like that. Fluoride calcifies your pineal gland. We'll do a video based on that and the importance of your pineal gland and, intuition and things like that. There's a lot that I didn't know. Perhaps there's a lot that you don't know, which again is maybe why you're listening. So I hope this is helping. So let's keep going. Now, we can understand then something of the power which the mind possesses over the body. The objective mind has certain effects on the body which are readily recognized. Let us see how the action of the subconscious mind over the body differs, though. You receive a wound, a cut, thousands of cells being the work of healing at once. They begin the work of healing at once. In a few days or a few weeks, the work is complete. You may even break a bone. No surgeon on earth can weld the parts together. Now, of course, we're not talking about setting rods and these sorts of things. He may set the bone for you, but it's the subjective mind which will immediately begin the process of welding the parts together. And in a short time, the bone is as solid as it was before. So Anel here is speaking to the intelligence of the vessel, of the body, and the fact that there's so much power in our vessels already. We simply have to recognize and be conscious of this power. These processes of the subconscious mind usually proceed without our personal knowledge or direction. And so long as we do not interfere, the result is perfect. But as these millions of repair cells are all intelligent and respond to our thought, they're often paralyzed and rendered impotent by our thoughts of fear, doubt, and anxiety. Now listen, I dare say that you've not heard these examples before, but you can read and you can Google and research, and there are hundreds of thousands of these examples where a diagnosis is given to, even a study, but diagnoses are given to people who are misdiagnosed. For example, I heard I have to put this on my in the description so you can reference this, because I don't like giving out loose information like this, but I'll just tell you for the time being. There was a gentleman who was misdiagnosed with a disease that, what was a terminal diagnosis. And he did not obviously know that it was being misdiagnosed, and the gentleman eventually died. Well, it was a misdiagnosis. The doctor made a mistake and gave him the wrong information, but because he believed he was going to die, he physically actually died. There are times where cancer patients will, there are a number of people who are diagnosed with cancer every day, different forms of cancer. And some folks live, some folks do not. It's the same diagnosis. The question is, why are some maintaining and why are others not? And it boils down to their thoughts about, what life is going to be now, how they're going to face this particular opportunity. Hanel is saying here, you can become impotent and render yourself paralyzed, your cells, your things that in your body that can be reconstructing your body. If you're in fear, you're paralyzing yourself. You're working against yourself. Now, the way to health is founded on the law of vibration, which is the basis of all science. And this law is brought into operation by the mind, the world within, what we just talked about. It's a matter of individual effort and practice. Our world of power is within. If we are wise, we shall not waste time and effort in trying to deal with effects as we find them in the world without, which is only an external, a reflection. That's where I'm talking about the fear, this pandemonium, this, all day long news cycle, that sort of stuff. You got to leave that stuff alone if you're serious about maintaining a high level of consciousness, as well as decreasing the level of anxiety and fear. You got to leave that stuff alone and go within. We shall always find the cause in the world within. By changing the cause, we change the effect. Every cell in your body is intelligent and will respond to your direction. The cells are all creators and will create the exact pattern which you give them. This influence or control over the body by the mind is coming to be more and more generally understood, and many physicians are now giving the matter their earnest attention. Dr. Albert T. Schofield, who has written several important books on the subject, says, the subject of mental therapeutics is still ignored in medical works, generally speaking. In our psychologies, no references are made to the central controlling power that rules the body for its good. And the power of the mind over the body is seldom spoke of. There can be no doubt that few patients are aware how much they can do for themselves. What the patient can do for himself, the forces he can set into motion are yet unseen. We are inclined to believe that they are far greater than most imagine and will undoubtedly be used more and more. Mental therapeutics may be directed by the patient himself to calming the mind in excitement, by arousing the feelings of joy, hope, faith, and love, by suggesting motives for exertion, by regular mental work, by diverting the thoughts from the malady, from diverting your thoughts from the pandemic and from fear and from continuous news cycles, which are produced to keep you in a certain state of fear. For your exercise this week, concentrate on Tennyson's beautiful lines. Speak to him, thou, for he hears, and spirit with spirit can meet. Closer is he than breathing, and nearer than hands and feet. Then try to realize that when you do, quote, speak to him, you are in touch with omnipotence, ability to do anything. This realization and recognition of this omnipresent power will quickly destroy any and every form of sickness or suffering and substitute harmony and perfection. Then remember, there are those who seem to think that sickness and suffering are sent from God. If so, every physician, every surgeon, and every Red Cross nurse has defined the will of God in hospitals and sanitariums or places of rebellion instead of houses of mercy. Of course, this quickly reasons itself into absurdity, but there are many who still cherish the idea. Then let the thought rest on the fact that until recently, theology has been trying to teach an impossible creator, one who created beings capable of sinning and then allowed them to be eternally punished for their sins. Of course, the necessary outcome of such extraordinary ignorance was to create fear instead of love. That's very important. Of course, the necessary outcome of such extraordinary ignorance was to create fear instead of love. And so, after 2,000 years of this kind of propaganda, theology is now busily engaged in apologizing for Christendom. You will then more readily appreciate the ideal man, the man made in the image and likeness of God, and you will more readily appreciate the all-originating mind that forms, upholds, sustains, originates, and creates all there is. So in summary, how may sickness be eliminated? By placing ourselves in harmony with natural laws, which are omnipotent. What is the process? Well, a realization that man is a spiritual being and that this spirit must necessarily be perfect. What is the result? A conscious recognition of this perfection, first intellectually, then emotionally. It brings about a manifestation of this perfection, of course, in your physical body. So again, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this has been helpful, and particularly in a time like today, where it can kind of give you a little bit more motivation as you practice, as you go into your silent time, to really consider who you are, not from the small me, not from the little ego place, not from a place of fear and anxiety or worry, but consider the fact that changes are being made for the awakening, for more folks to awaken. And all things do work together. All things really do work together. So be well, be safe, continue to follow us here at Master Key System, Charles Sonell, True Higher Self. Subscribe to our channel if you've not done so already. And we wish you the best. See you next week.